Welcome to the Explainer. So, today we are unpacking something absolutely crucial. It's a comprehensive 10-part tutorial focused entirely on IPv4 and IPv6 transition technologies. Now, if you're an infrastructure or security architect and you're the one tasked with supporting your organization's inevitable migration to IPv6, and you already know your way around IPv4, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to dig into the architectures, the hidden security traps, and the firewall designs you absolutely have to know to survive this shift. This entire curriculum comes to us from Virtualization Options LLC, which is a technology research, education, and advisory organization based out of Colorado. And look, what makes this tutorial so incredibly authoritative is that it's not just a bunch of high-level fluff. They have meticulously grounded this entire analysis in core Internet Engineering Task Force RFCs. They're essentially handing architects the exact, hard-nosed blueprints you need to secure your network perimeters during this massive transition. Okay, let's dive right into this. Chapter 1 kicks off with a pretty blunt reality check. IPv4 address exhaustion is not some looming, theoretical, maybe-in-the-future risk. It is a concluded event, period. The INF free pool was officially depleted way back in February 2011, and all the regional internet registries, they exhausted their standard allocation pools by 2019. So, because legacy systems literally can't just be updated overnight, the coexistence of both of these protocols is a non-negotiable, decades-long operational reality for us. And just to put the sheer scale of this into perspective for a second, as of 2026, roughly 45% of all users reach Google services over IPv6. Major internet service providers are already out there operating IPv6 primary or even IPv6 only access networks. So this transition isn't just on the horizon anymore. It is happening right under our feet at a massive global scale. Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the tutorial overview and transition imperative, then hit core transition mechanisms, followed by advanced translation and IPv4 as a service. After that, security analysis and mitigations, and we'll wrap up with a firewall design and action plan. So, kicking things off with Section 1, Tutorial Overview and Imperative. Across its 10 chapters, this curriculum breaks down 11 completely different transition mechanisms. But the best part is it doesn't just stop at explaining how they function. Chapters 2 through 4 actually run them through a rigorous stride security analysis. Looking at spoofing, tampering, repudiation, the whole 9 yards. And again, all the mitigation strategies are deeply rooted in critical foundational documents, specifically RFC 4890 and RFC 6105. Moving right along to Section 2, Core Transition Mechanisms. Chapters 5 and 6 tackle the core mechanisms, and they basically group these into 3 main buckets: dual stack, tunneling, and translation. And the really crucial takeaway here, every single one of these introduces its own highly specific attack surface. Let's look at dual stack first. This is defined as running complete IPv4 and IPv6 stacks simultaneously on every single node. The packets traverse the network natively, zero translation. It's definitely the simplest operational model, and it beautifully preserves those end-to-end semantics for both protocols. But, and this is a huge but, it categorically does not solve the underlying issue of IPv4 address exhaustion. You still need a public IPv4 address for every single host. So naturally, there is a massive architectural trade-off at play here. On the plus side, you get no translation overhead and absolutely no single point of failure at some relay. But look at the disadvantages. You are literally doubling your IP address management complexity. You're doubling your routing table sizes. Your operations teams now have to actively manage and troubleshoot 2 completely parallel network realities at the exact same time. Which brings us to, well, a security architect's worst nightmare. Dual stack creates these massive security gaps if you don't handle it perfectly. Chapter 7 points out the single most common misconfiguration. Teams will write these beautiful, meticulously detailed IPv4 IP tables rules and then completely forget to populate these separate IP6 tables. The IP6 door is just left wide open. On top of that, vulnerability scanners often only check IPv4 inventories, totally missing exposed IP6 services. And if an application binds to the IPv6 wildcard socket, represented by the double colons, it actively listens on both protocols, completely bypassing your IPv4-only perimeter controls, just slipping right past. All right, Section 3, Advanced Translation and IPv4 as a Service Architectures. These middle chapters focus heavily on complex network architectures. Things like dual-stack light, defined in RFC 63.3, which allows internet service providers to run really highly efficient IPv6-only core networks while still somehow providing legacy IPv4 connectivity to their customers. To really grasp this, we need to get the terminology straight. First up is the B4 element, the basic bridging broadband element. This sits right in the customer's equipment and encapsulates their legacy IPv4 traffic into an IPv6 tunnel. It then sends that tunnel straight to the ISP's AFTR, the Address Family Transition Router. The AFTR basically unwraps the traffic and performs carrier-grade NAT. This allows a tiny pool of public IPv4 addresses to be shared across thousands of subscribers. Pretty clever, right? Now, the authors spend a lot of time in Chapter 8 comparing the major architectural trade-offs between stateless and stateful protocols. Stateless mechanisms like MAPT and SIIT are algorithmic. They offer just incredible scalability because the router doesn't have to remember every single connection. But on the flip side, stateful mechanisms like NAT64 and DSLite are absolutely necessary when your primary goal is IPv4 address conservation. Even though, and this is key, maintaining that massive state table creates a major bottleneck and a prime target for denial of service attacks. That brings us to Section 4, Security Analysis and Mitigations. This is where that stride analysis we talked about really shines. Chapter 9 does not mince words when it comes to legacy tunneling protocols. The core lesson? Every single transition mechanism is going to break traditional perimeter controls in some way, and you must design compensatory controls, period. The tutorial demands the immediate deprecation of ISAT-TAP, 6-4, and Teredo. These mechanisms offer zero operational benefit in modern networks today, but they present massively disproportionate security risks. For example, ISAT-TAP is notoriously vulnerable to DNS-based router discovery exploits. An attacker can use that to easily hijack routing within an entire enterprise. The mandate here is super clear. Shut them down. Now, for the mechanisms you actually do keep, like SIIT translation, the curriculum provides some highly specific mitigation strategies. It explicitly warns architects, never, ever rely on the translator itself for inbound filtering. Instead, you absolutely must deploy a dedicated stateful firewall in line with the translator. Beyond that, you need strict source address validation, fragment rate limiting to prevent buffer exhaustion, and BCP38 ingress filtering at all of your edges. And finally, Section 5, Firewall Design and Action Plan. So, we've reached the culmination of the tutorial. Chapter 10 basically empowers the security architect with a really clear step-by-step mandate. It's a comprehensive checklist to make sure no protocol, tunnel, or translation mechanism is left unmonitored or unhardened. Let's walk through a few of the most critical steps to secure your perimeter right now. Step 1 of the action plan is killing those deprecated tunnels we just talked about. You need to block Protocol 41 at all your perimeter firewalls and only permit it for explicitly documented and authorized 6 and 4 tunnel broker IPs. You also must block UDP port 3544 to stop Teredo traffic cold, both inbound and outbound. And finally, you need to drop the 2002 /16 prefix at your perimeter to ensure 6-4 traffic is completely stopped in its tracks. Next up on the checklist are critical Layer 2 controls for your access switches. The action plan prescribes deploying RA Guard based on RFC 6105 to ensure router advertisements are only ever permitted from authorized uplink ports. You also need to enable DHCPv6 Guard and dynamic neighbor discovery inspection to validate messages against your snooping binding tables. Look, if you don't do this, a single compromised machine can just broadcast itself as an IPv6 router and silently black hole or man in the middle all of your local traffic. Finally, the checklist tackles translation security. If you are using NAT64, you've got to secure it with DNSSEC to validate records before synthesis. And because NAT64 is stateful, you absolutely must aggressively rate limit state creation per source IPv6 address. Otherwise, you're looking at malicious state table exhaustion. For DSLite architectures, you need to authenticate your B4 customer elements via DHCPv6 to prevent spoofing attacks against your AFTR NAT mappings. Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, but I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question to take back to your engineering teams. Is your organization's perimeter blindly trusting IPv6 traffic, all while you meticulously filter your legacy IPv4?
If the answer is yes, or even if it's just, I'm not actually sure, then it is definitely time to dive into the full 10-part tutorial from Virtualization Options LLC and close those security gaps for good. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.